All right, so we now have our second competitor in our policy case competition from Pittsburg State University in Kansas. And they were presented with this question: should the Central Bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve Bank, introduce a U.S. government-controlled digital currency and eliminate paper currency and coin?
All right, so like Professor said, we were left with a tough question. My name is Trip Baker.
I'm Derek Yusa.
I'm Johnny Harris.
And we are college students right now who, if you checked in our wallets, we probably have 0 cash bills. We barely use the paper dollar. We're using debit cards more and more and more. And that being said, the tough question is still in place. Do we completely get rid of a paper dollar that's currently being used less and less and less? And while this seems like an easy and convenient idea, there are a lot of stipulations to be considered. We're going to break this down from a political, philosophical, and economical standpoint. And Johnny, if you want to get started.
All right. So at this topic, we're going to side with classical libertarianism. We think that we should stick with the current system of physical U.S. dollars and reserves in the bank. So we believe that this is the best outcome for the people, as people will be able to have more control over their dollar rather than it being easily accessible by government databases all over the world. When you have a physical dollar in your wallet, the government is not able to easily track that if you move it or take it into a safe. People will be able to hide their money, store it wherever they want, and they can have control of that. If you make every dollar into a form of cryptocurrency, it has to be held on a database somewhere, likely easily accessible by the government, seeing as it's issued by them. We believe the government will lose credibility when trying to take people's dollars to implement it into this current system. So we assume that the federal government would have to rely on people bringing in their own old currency in order for them to exchange it for the new currency, the new crypto dollar. And we don't think that they're going to be able to get all of those. There would be a huge loss of value dollars-wise, because not everybody's going to bring in their dollars. Some of them are just going to be lost to time. And not even that, people will likely not trust the new version either. That'll also slow down the changeover, but people won't change it because, well, you just told me to get rid of this thing that I've been saving my entire life so that I can retire, so that I can buy a house. And you're going to say, well, now you have to do it this specific way. Likely, people are not going to trust it right off the bat. There will have to be some changeover, and we believe that there will be value lost during that process. And finally, this would exclude people without good internet access from making transactions more often. So poor individuals trying to make it up in the world will be paid in a currency that they won't have access to quite as often. And it just limits their ability to gain wealth even further.
All right, so politically, we don't really love the idea of the government controlling our money or knowing where every single ounce of our money is at. We want to privatize money supply, and while the paper dollar is still regulated by the U.S. government, like Johnny said, we still have a sense of control with at least some of our money. The U.S. dollar, while maybe overly regulated, it's credible. A digitized form of currency may at some point be credible, but in introductory stages, this will take a long time to get perfect. And in a world where we're using debit cards and credit cards and so many major purchases are being made every single day, this is going to be a very tough transition. Going back to, like I said, we're using debit cards, and to be quite honest, they work pretty well. We're digitized enough with card transactions and private institutions. And while the government, like I said, is regulated with our paper dollars, it's going to be a drastic increase with digital currency. They're going to have so much more control, and while we want free markets, this is not a good move for that. We've seen cryptocurrency boom over the last 5 years. We've seen Tether backed by the US dollar even. And while there's some positive movement there, we still don't know whether to trust that. And so cryptocurrency is just such a toss-up as is. We see the stock market go up and down with cryptocurrency. platforms like Tether should be researched thoroughly, and I think that a transition to complete digitized currency is going to require the same. And that's all we have for political. Now, let's take a look from an economic standpoint.
So from an economic standpoint, the biggest thing we're concerned about is the cost of implementing this new system. So how long would it take? How the manpower? How much is this going to affect our economic standards? And is this going to cost millions, if not billions of dollars to implement over a certain amount of time? Another thing we're going to have to think about is how are they going to change it? So right now, through their monetary and fiscal policy, it takes several weeks, if not months, for something to take an effect. And with this now, if it's backed by the dollar, if it's a 1-to-1 ratio, could they persuade that ratio in a way, and we'd see immediate effects to our economy. The dollar could be increased and decreased at the will of the government, limiting our freedoms. Another cost to think about for our economy would be our infrastructure. So cyber attacks from other nations could cripple everything we do as an economy. So right now, if we were attacked by a different country with an EMP bomb, that would only limit us so much. We still have our physical currency in hand, and if we give that up, then we're giving up the power to defend our currency on the internet.
That being said, obviously it's a new idea. Eliminating the paper dollar completely and going to a digital form of currency regulated by the government is a big move, and at this point there's too many questions and we don't know who to trust in a world where we're already questioning what's going on within the US government. We don't think it's a great idea to give them every bit of our money and see what happens from there. Again, very little knowledge, a lot of questions, a lot of hesitancies from us. The US dollar, while it does have its problems, has been very credible for a long time now, and we don't really see a big enough positive reason for us to make this drastic change. Thank you, guys.
Okay, plenty of time for our professor judges for questions.
Yes, sir.
You gave a lot of objections to this policy. One of them was that it erodes privacy and freedom. One of them was that we don't know how much this transition would cost. And those are kind of different kinds of objections. I'm wondering if you think that if we had an answer to that second question, like say this wasn't, some other country here had already done it, so we have a pretty good idea how much this is gonna cost. Is there like a percentage of GDP increase that would overcome the privacy and loss of freedom objection? Like if we thought that, for instance, oh, this is gonna have a GDP multiplier effect of X, is that enough to override the other objection that you have? Or are these objections kind of?
I think our freedom of being able to control our currency and having a physical dollar in hand is more valuable than 0.5% of GDP. I think it's the best interest of the consumer and of the individual who maybe doesn't have access to internet.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You argue for the benefit of having privacy and control over your money, free from oversight. That sounds a lot like something a criminal would want. Does it primarily benefit criminals? What would you say to that argument?
So, I don't think that the dollar in its current stance is necessarily geared towards benefiting criminals. You're right, it would be a lot harder to get away with stealing under the digital currency, because you'd have to steal it online. You couldn't just mug somebody in public. So, but at the same time, you have to think about the ease of transactions. People won't have access to their money at all times with that. And again, if you're hacking it, you could hide your physical money. If you had physical money, you could hide it somewhere like under your mattress or in a vault or something. so that you can't have that everything stolen from you at once. So there's still plenty of benefits from the physical point of view that outweigh that criminal defense.
I would add on to that and just completely acknowledge that there is risk by doing this. But that being said, with digitized currency, there's risks both externally and internally. Who knows who's regulating our money in the Oval Office, the White House, wherever that's being regulated. While I would love to trust our U.S. government, there are bad apples. So while there's a risk of criminals tampering with their money with the current state as it is now, there's also huge risk that we have to consider with this implementation. And I don't know if one has more value than the other to make a change like this.
Anybody else?
Any other questions? We got a few minutes left.
I got one more, I guess. Earlier in the presentation, you said we're going to stick with the classical libertarian answer and stay with the currency we have. Doesn't the currency we have almost the same, if not to the same degree, objections that you're raising against the possible CBDC? I mean, we see people being unbanked now. You can be stripped of your access to anything you have in a bank. It's really kind of only the coins that you're having under your mattress. So is that objection?
To a lesser degree with the physical dollar, because we're saying that if you have to have everything in a cryptocurrency in order to make any transactions, that's going to be stored somewhere. And we don't know if you could divide that up between banks or if the U.S. Treasury is going to have it all. But at the very least, the U.S. Treasury is going to have access to all of it. With physical dollars, again, you can hide some of it, and so you'll be protected from some of it. And so that at least harms people to a lesser degree than the current system.
So this is cryptocurrency controlled by the government would also affect our ability to make a run on the banks and give us the freedom of acquiring our dollar at will.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Now we're off the hot seat. Come on